Flight was never an evolutionary goal. It was a biomechanical gamble. While we view the sky as a domain of grace, the first aerial pioneers were driven by the raw, brutal panic of survival. You are about to witness the moment life broke the chains of gravity through what was likely a catastrophic survival heist. More than 300 million years ago, a silent world was interrupted by the rhythmic, unnatural sound of motion. A creature, anchored to the mud, found itself suspended in the void. The oldest hard evidence of this leap is locked in stone, etched into the Wamsutta Formation of Massachusetts. Every fossil is a crime scene, waiting to reveal how the heavy, terrestrial weight of a body was exchanged for the fragile freedom of the open air. The data creates a contradiction. Did these first pioneers develop wings for a calculated leap into the canopy? Or were these structures a redundant mutation for swimming that suddenly found purchase in the air? The answer is buried in the anatomy of creatures that had to rewrite their own existence just to escape what hunted them from below. We are investigators at the dawn of flight. Gravity is the ultimate tyrant, a constant tax on every moving body. To break its hold, life had to sacrifice stability for potential energy. We will map the lineages that paid this price. The insects, the pterosaurs, and the birds, the three independent rebellions against the ground, with the bats arriving last as the modern coda to this story. This was no gentle transition. Every success was built on a series of punishing compromises, rewiring metabolic machinery and stripping away skeletal mass until the body became a precarious vessel. These creatures played a high-stakes game with physics, where a single failed stroke meant a terminal plummet. The mystery lies in the cost. Why trade the safety of the ground for the energy-draining exposure of the air? As we trace these skeletons, we find that the wings themselves were often a secondary solution to an immediate crisis. We are cataloging a debt that remains paid in full by every bird currently in the air. The story begins in the Carboniferous, a damp wilderness of giant ferns and towering horsetails. Insects, the original masters of the air, were the first animals to evolve powered flight, doing so roughly 300 to 350 million years ago. That window marks the outer edge of when life first took the leap. The oldest hard evidence sits deeper inside it. Their sudden appearance in the fossil record, like the 335-million-year-old Delitzschala, ignited a scientific debate that continues today. These pioneers mastered flight, while other creatures remained earthbound. Yet the initial purpose of their early wings remains a mystery. Were they truly built for flight, or did they serve a different function entirely, as extensions or modified gills used for temperature control, or simply for skimming the surface of ancient swamps? The stone captures a 310-million-year-old pioneer, an impression unearthed in the Wamsutta Formation, possibly a stem group mayfly. It is the oldest known full-body impression of a winged insect. Further back, in the deeper layers of the Carboniferous, we find Delitzschala with a wingspan of only 5 centimeters. This Paleophyodictyopteran offers a window into the mechanics of early flight. Science remains split between two blueprints for how those wings emerged. The paranotal lobe hypothesis argues that wings evolved from flattened extensions of the thoracic terga, serving as sails for stability or temperature control. The exite hypothesis counters with a more active origin, modified, movable abdominal gills. This shift from respiration to aerial lift is a massive anatomical hurdle. An organ must adapt for flight while its original function remains essential for survival. We see the final form of these early experiments in the stone, yet the intermediate stages. The organisms caught in the middle are thin, leaving a fundamental gap in our understanding of how life first broke its chain to the ground. Millions of years after the insect pioneers, a new architecture began to stir. The vertebrates were ready to claim the clouds. Out of the late Triassic, around 220 million years ago, a lineage of reptiles emerged that would become the first vertebrates to achieve true flapping flight, the pterosaurs. These creatures are often grouped with dinosaurs in the public imagination, but the biology tells a different story. They were a distinct branch of the reptilian family tree. To understand how a creature built for the stability of land bridged the gap into such radical aerial biomechanics, we have to read the wing itself. To rise, the pterosaur abandoned the branched structure of feathers for something denser, a living, high-tension membrane. This was not merely skin, but a matrix of muscle and other tissues, anchored along the flank and stretched toward the clouds by a single, hyperlongated fourth finger. This skeletal spar created a leading edge that reached from the wrist down to the ankles. By tethering the wing directly to the leg, these reptiles transformed their silhouette into an adjustable aerofoil. Minute shifts in joint position allowed for control over lift and drag, a mechanical adaptation that granted them dominance through most of the Mesozoic, from the late Triassic to the end of the Cretaceous. It was a high-stakes trade-off. This specialization rendered them ungainly on the ground, pinning their survival to the sky. A structure this complex cannot appear in a single generation. Somewhere in the Triassic, the transition from a terrestrial reptile to a creature of the air had to be bridged. For decades, the leap from ground to sky seemed to emerge from a void. That changed with a 2020 study in Nature, which pinpointed the likely precursors of pterosaur flight, the lagerpetids. These were nimble, terrestrial reptiles that scurried across the Triassic landscape between 201 and 237 million years ago. They lived their lives shackled to the earth, yet their skeletons carried the latent blueprint for a total physical transformation. A runner's frame that one branch of its descendants would reconfigure to withstand the violent mechanics of flight. The Jurassic landscape shifts. In the shadows of the conifers, a new silhouette rises, the feathered theropod. For millions of years, these filaments served only to insulate, repel water, or signal to a mate. But suddenly, the biology tilts. We find the emergence of asymmetrical feathers, veins stiffened and curved for the purpose of biting into the air. These were not merely for display. This specialization transformed a dinosaur into a potential aerial candidate. Yet the mechanism of their debut remains one of paleontology's deepest fractures. The arboreal model imagines an ancestor leaping from the high canopy, using gravity to pull it into a glide. The cursorial model places that ancestor on the flat, open ground, flapping as it ran and leaped after prey. The bones do not yet name a winner, and the fossils caught between the two strategies are exactly the ones we are still hunting. In the limestone of Solnhofen, we find the Urvogel Archaeopteryx living some 150 million years ago in the late Jurassic. It is a biological contradiction. Its mouth is armed with jagged teeth, its 3 fingers end in hooked claws, and a long, bony tail trails behind it. Yet its wings hold the asymmetrical feathers of a modern bird, the signature of an animal sculpted for the air. For decades, researchers wondered if this creature was merely a glorified glider. A 2022 acquisition at the Field Museum in Chicago tipped the evidence toward powered flight. High-resolution analysis of its skeletal structure indicates the animal possessed the mechanical architecture to beat its wings. It was not just jumping, it was flapping. The same fossil revealed scaled feet, pointing to a life that also played out on the ground. So the binary of arboreal versus cursorial remains open, and the Archaeopteryx evidence suggests the answer was never cleanly one or the other. This was no ghost of the trees. Its wings could beat the air, yet its scaled feet confirm it spent substantial time on the ground. It did not trade the earth for the sky. It occupied both. This biological paradox required immediate, ruthless anatomical compromise. To support the weight of these specialized appendages, bones thinned and hollowed, shedding density for range. Energy demands spiked. Every failed takeoff was a lethal miscalculation. Flight was a high-stakes metabolic tax levied on every creature that dared to leave the ground. As we track these fossils, it is clear the transition from a running, leaping predator to a creature of the air was a push against the constraints of a hostile, crowded Earth. To break gravity, biology had to be rewritten. The development of a deep-keeled sternum, a massive bony plate, became the anchor for the powerful flight muscles that powered the stroke. This came alongside strong, stiff, lightweight bones and extended forelimbs and fingers, adaptations that forced creatures into a cycle of brutal trade-offs. The high-octane metabolism required to sustain flapping flight limits the diversity of diets and environments these animals can occupy. Every soaring creature is effectively a prisoner of its own anatomy, trading strength and stability for a lightweight, high-energy existence that demands constant fuel. Two distinct blueprints emerge from the debris of the Mesozoic. Pterosaurs conquered the air through rapid evolution, achieving flight with a smaller brain structure similar to that of non-flying dinosaurs. A fast path that favored immediate survival over neurological complexity. Birds took a different route. Their ancestors refined their brains gradually, accumulating the wiring for flight over millions of years of experimentation. This disparate development reveals two fundamental truths about life's rebellion against gravity. One relied on a bold jump into a new niche with a dinosaur's brain still in its skull. The other leaned on a patient, layered transformation. The same horizon, reached by two utterly different roads. In 1784, the Solnhofen limestone of Bavaria yielded a skeleton that defied every known category of life. The Italian scientist Cosimo Alessandro Collini examined the specimen, noting its reptilian frame coupled with wings that demanded a different architecture. It was the first pterosaur ever described, and for decades it remained an enigma. This was the smoking gun of prehistoric flight, the first hard proof that vertebrates conquered the air long before the ancestors of birds took wing. The find turned the fossil record into a high-stakes crime scene. We now recognize that sustaining such anatomy, the high-tension skin membranes, the lightweight frames, and the massive muscles required for lift carried a metabolic cost. Flight was no effortless evolution. It was a taxing luxury. Every creature that left the ground paid for its freedom through rigid specialization, forcing them into narrow, high-pressure niches. 4 distinct lineages have mastered the sky in the history of life on Earth. Insects led the way, followed by the pterosaurs, the reptiles that dominated the Mesozoic, then the feathered theropods that evolved into birds, and finally the bats, the most recent and the only mammals to achieve powered flight, stretching a membrane across the elongated digits of their hands and steering the dark with echolocation. Each represents a desperate, repeated escape from a surface world tightening under the pressure of predation and scarcity. These were not singular, lucky accidents. They were biomechanical responses to a planet that grew increasingly crowded and lethal. When resources on the ground became contested, the sky became the only remaining frontier. Whether fleeing a hunter or chasing a new food source, these animals traded the stability of the Earth for a physics that demands constant, high-energy investment. The sky is not a home. It is a taxing, expensive compromise. These masters of flight live on the edge of metabolic exhaustion, their hollow bones and specialized muscles serving as a permanent record of their ancestors' survival. That rhythmic pulse we heard in the dark, the one that defied the silence of an ancient world, was the persistent drumbeat of a biological survival gamble. Every beat of a dragonfly's wing, every stretch of a pterosaur's membrane, and every adjustment of a feathered theropod's anatomy was forged in the heat of a crisis. We look back at the stone and mistake these creatures for masters of the air. In reality, they were refugees. They did not aim for the horizon. They fled the shadow of a predator or the starvation of a shrinking territory. The fossil record is not a silent gallery of grace. It is an archive of experiments that were forced to abandon the ground or perish. Countless failed designs lie buried, flickering into the air and vanishing before the planet could write their names into the earth. What we see today, the bird and the insect, are merely the few that survived the trial. The fossil record preserves only the winners. When a bird rises from a branch today, you are observing more than a simple biological act. You are witnessing the latest iteration of a 300-million-year-old rebellion against the ground. Each wingbeat carries the legacy of an ancient struggle, the result of a brutal trial that purged everything less than capable. They carved out a home in a vertical world that was never meant for them, fueled by an ancestral drive to escape the reach of the earth.